Vogel. Heather's joining us. There's so many people joining us. I'm so happy to see this. Danica's here. Sunny Shorts from MassBio. Ed is joining us. Looks good. Well, Zach, let us know when you're ready for us to get started.
Let's do it. Take it away, Edie. And Praveen,
all right.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, hey, Zach.
I'm sorry?
No, just saying, hey, Zach. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Edie Stringfellow. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at the Massachusetts Biotechnology Council, or we just say MassBio. I would like to welcome you to our new makeshift virtual program that is going to be held every 2 weeks on Mondays from 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to discuss everything and everything related to diversity, inclusion, equity, and engagement. Before we get started, I'm going to go over the flow of the program with you, as well as some ground rules. So for the first 20 minutes or so, it's going to be a Q&A session between me and Praveen. And then at this time, I'd like for you to mute your video and your audio. And after that 20 minutes, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. And to know that we can see you and recognize you, if you can unmute yourself, both video and audio. How does that sound? All right, so let's get started. I would like to introduce you to the one and only. Our featured guest is Dr. Praveen Tipirneni, and he said it's okay that I call him Praveen. And we're going to talk about everything. But first off, Praveen, if you would like to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role, about your journey, and a little bit more about Morphic Therapeutics.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this event. It looks like a great group and a great start to a set of videos and podcasts. I'm sure we can all learn a lot from it. Also, I encourage, hopefully this is interactive. And I think they'd be best if people are free to speak and we can keep this all interactive. But my background, so I'm a physician by training. I'm an internist by training, and finished residency. And from residency, I actually, while I was practicing, I went and got my MBA at University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School. From there, I was in venture capital briefly, and then the bulk of my career was actually at Cubist Pharmaceuticals, which was an antibiotic company in Lexington, Massachusetts. So I was there for 13 years, and there might be some people here that were from Cubist, but I feel like I grew up in the company. And from there, in 2015, we were acquired by Merck. And after getting acquired by Merck, I was trying to decide what to do next. And this is 2015. I wasn't thinking about. I was actually trying to. I was actually trying to avoid the CEO role. Actually, I had a bunch of two small kids that I figured would be off to college, and I should enjoy the time with them. So I was actually trying to avoid the CEO role. But ultimately, I met Tim. I met Kevin Bitterman, who at the time was at Polaris Ventures. Now he's at Atlas Ventures. I got really excited about the technology. And so I joined a company called Morphic Therapeutic when it was 3 people and it was incubating in the Polaris offices. And so I didn't know any of them. I just, I interviewed and threw my hat in the ring. And once I got the CEO position there, we launched the company, and it's been a great 5 years since then. The company, actually, I kind of say that Morphic Therapeutic is about as bread and butter a biotech as it gets. This was founded by Tim Springer, a Harvard professor, who actually has been in the news quite a bit lately because he's one of the founding investors of Moderna. And so this is a 3-decade journey of Tim, really. But Tim discovered the integrin drug target class. So it's a set of receptors, fundamental immunological biology. And he discovered in the early 80s. He had some immediate success with a company called Leukocyte, which he founded, and that company was acquired by Millennium. And but the problem with the integrin target class is that it's worked very well for biologics, but it never worked for oral small molecules. And so it took Tim another decade plus to figure out what the problem was with oral small molecules. They were all failing. But once he figured that out, he went to Polaris and said, hey, I think we have another company here. For the very first time, we can create, oral drugs for the integrins. And it's applicable across a huge range of therapeutic areas, including, inflammatory bowel disease, including oncology, including fibrosis. And so, wide variety of therapeutic areas that we're working on, a broad platform that Tim brought forward to found Morphic Therapeutic.
Well, I do want to come back and talk about integrin proteins that it's not really talked about or well known. So I do want to come back and visit that. But at first, I want to tell you that I had such a wonderful response from people reaching out and expressing how thoughtful it was to have you. They were so grateful to have learned from you. So can you tell us a little bit about your leadership style and what makes Morphic such a special place?
Sure. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm flattered by it, so I really appreciate when you said that that was a thrill to hear that. Well, I think so the company actually in terms of what convinced me to start as the CEO of Morphic, like I said before, is I was actually trying to avoid the CEO position. Actually, the thing that got me really excited was the opportunity to start a scientific culture from scratch. And I'm not saying it's right, but I had a perspective on the things I thought a scientific culture, what it would look like. And one of the things, I mean, I think there's a lot of things we could talk about, but one of the things that I talk about at Morphic is about just bringing your authentic self to Morphic. And so oftentimes we think about our work self and our home self. And for me, you have one self that you bring to work, and it's not different at home. It's not different at work. And so I really want people to kind of be themselves. Some people say that they have two jobs. One is the job that they do, and the other one is managing the impression of themselves. Like I want that second part to be gone, right? And really let people be who they are, both the good, the bad, and everything else.
Now, let's talk about the culture for a second, because I did a little bit of research. I reached out to some people that work at Morphic, and I also went to your website. So tell me a little bit about this waiter pad and how it factors into the day-to-day at Morphic.
Yeah, well, thanks, Edie. So the waiter, it's an interesting, I don't know if people have seen a waiter's pad, right? It's a pad that in restaurants, the waiter writes down, and I used to use these at Cubist, and mainly because they were cheap, right? Because they cost 50 cents, and so I used to use them. But the interesting thing for me was so when I started interviewing for CEO positions, I didn't carry a briefcase or anything like that. I just literally had a waiter's pad in my pocket when I was going to interviews and things like that. And I noticed, when you're asking questions, and I wanted to kind of take out that waiter's pad from my pocket, it actually was a little bit difficult to do. Like, I felt a little embarrassed about, interviewing for CEO positions and not having kind of a Crane notebook or something like that, but just a kind of a waiter's pad, right? And people would always comment on it, and so I was thinking to myself that oh my God, I'm 45 years old, right? And interviewing for CEO positions, and I'm still embarrassed about taking a waiter's pad out of my pocket of what people will think about me, right? And so for me, I had to really force myself to take that waiter's pad out and just kind of say, hey, this is who I am. This is just a piece of paper, and not worry about that impression that I'm making on the person on the other side of it. It's just a piece of paper. And so we actually give the waiter's pad to every employee that joins Morphic, because I want them to not worry about their impression, right? And it's almost like a muscle, because it's actually, you guys should try it sometimes. It's pretty funny. Like, if you start writing notes on a waiter's pad, the first thing people are going to ask you is, I'll have a burger and fries with that, right? And then, but from there, you can get quite embarrassed, and utilizing that as a tool to get over and worrying about the impression that you make on people. I found that a useful tool, and that's what I wanted to bring to Morphic in the same way that we talked about, in that, you know, they like just focus on your job, focus on who you are, don't worry about the impression that you make on others.
Well, I like that because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and anyone who knows me, I talk a lot about psychologically safety at work. That is the only way that you can bring your full self to work and be able to contribute openly or course correct in a direction and talk freely with your team. So while you're encouraging that, how are you also incorporating diversity and inclusion? And I saw your support about open borders. So how are you incorporating all of this under your leadership style and making this a very inclusive culture at Morphic?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of topics there. I mean, I think we can take it a bunch of different directions. I mean, I think diversity is very important, and it's for me both, you know, accomplishing our mission, right? And I think the simple way I look at it is that, you know, we're attacking very complex problems, and each person has a set of tools that they bring to the table. And the more diversity that you have, the bigger your toolkit to solve these problems. So I think even from a mission standpoint, diversity is very important. And I talk about this actually. We did a partnership with Janssen, and that particular partnership are very, very, very closely with each other. And in that article, I was saying that, you know, when the person on the Janssen side said this is the type of partner that they want, I said me too, and they were quite surprised because it's not the easiest type of partnership to have. But I figured that with the difficult problems that we have, you're much better able to do that if you have, you know, a toolkit based on very diverse perspectives. So diversity is important to me. And when we're talking about safety, I think the interesting thing in this time, you know, we're in these unprecedented times, you know, this huge social experiment almost in some ways about helping each other and sacrificing for the community good. And so, you know, we are in this very interesting time when we're actually talking about physical safety, right? Which is not something we often talk about, you know, when we're talking about, you know, our kind of workplaces and things like that. And so I think it was interesting. You know, we at Morphic, obviously we're worried about the bottom line. We're worried about hitting our milestone. We're worried about accomplishing our mission. But ahead of the governor, ahead of, as far as we know, you know, anybody we know, just by a few days, not like we were way ahead, but we thought about the safety of our employees and immediately went to a kind of a work from home. And this was, you know, probably about 3 or 4 days before, you know, anybody else. And that, I think that's what it kind of comes down to, right? Is that, you know, if there's no way we're going to accomplish our mission if our folks are not feeling safe, either physically or psychologically. And I think that just happens to be a recent example of it.
Okay, Praveen, I may have demonstrated that my house is old school by the landline ringing. So thank you for ignoring that. But one thing I also wanted to say that I noticed on your website was that your CMC team is all women. Was that by design, or how was that incorporated, or was it intentional? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So yeah, we're super. I mean, especially in the time period that we're in. So where Morphic Therapeutic is we're imminently going in the clinic with our first product, and then second half of the year another product. So of course, supply is very important and foundational at this point in terms of starting clinical trials and moving down that path. And you know, we are super proud of the fact that, you know, our CMC team is entirely women, right? And that you know, I'd love to say that was by design, but it it was not by design, but it just goes to show you that a foundational and such an important role, entirely represented by women, can have just such a great impact. And I think I've never seen that before, an entire function that's entirely women, and they've delivered again and again for us. And so we are super proud of that team. And I think while again we encourage diversity and we certainly try to get the ratios as balanced as possible, I can't say this was purely by design, but we're thrilled that it happened.
Now that happened, how did you come about with the recognition program? You just honored and highlighted how the women are doing in the company. How is everyone recognized in the company?
Yeah, it's a very flat organization. It's actually Chris, who's on this call. I remember at one employee meeting, he did say that, especially I think he was speaking more to our younger employees, that you're never going to find another company this accessible, right? Where all the senior management is completely accessible. You can walk into anybody's office at any time. And he was saying that, kind of in his career, he hadn't seen a company that, the folks were, just so easy to talk to and so accessible. And so, we have a very flat organization. And I think the recognition, which, I can't say that I came up with it came through some of our younger employees, but the idea behind it was that anybody could sort of highlight the accomplishments of anybody else. It doesn't matter the rank, doesn't matter, the seniority or anything else, that it just kind of fundamentally cements the very horizontal nature of our organization, the very non-hierarchical nature of the organization. And I think that's worked well. And I actually think that I probably have the least recognitions of anybody in the company.
Okay, Praveen, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Can you explain and talk about your CMC team for those who are not familiar with the terminology?
Yeah, so it stands for Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls. So is what CMC stands for. And those are the people that's a group that is responsible for the supply. So if you're making sure drug is available, for clinical trials and ultimately for commercial. So it's you can think about it as in a way, kind of the manufacturing group of sorts. That's not exactly right, but think about it as the people that are responsible for supply.
Okay, let's open this up for more questions from the audience. If you could unmute your phones, unmute your audio and unmute your video. That way we can see and recognize you if you have a question. And while we're getting questions, Praveen, please tell us about, I'm a huge fan of your cartoons, and a couple of your employees in the lab was talking about the Integrin Village. Can you talk about that for a minute while we get some more of the questions coming in?
Yeah. Let me see if this works, but I think I can actually put it up here. Hold on.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. So there. Let me get out of the way here. But so that's the Integrin Village. And what can you guys see that in my background? But the Integrin Village. And I think what that highlights is what I wanted to highlight there. Oftentimes these cartoons I give as gifts, right? And that's the function of them. In some ways to represent that I put in efforts and recognizing other people's efforts. And so the Integrin Village here for me was I was using it to talk about our Series B'ers, our founder, our chairman of the board there, and that flag of Christensen, as well as the two buildings there, AbbVie and Johnson & Johnson, that are in the picture. And so I really wanted to represent how it really takes a village to create any kind of drug company. And the interesting thing here, it's actually not in this version, but after we went IPO, I put the 4 banks, the investment banks in there. And the funny thing was the comment that people would often, when they see that, they're like, okay, you guys must be new because nobody talks positively about the investment banks. but I was I just wanted to represent that, how thankful we were to the banks in helping us, and what a great job they did, and wanted to include them, in the whole village. And I think they were pretty excited about that as well.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. I do have a question from Joanne Kamen. She's Executive Director with Agene, and she's interested in learning about the steps your company is taking to increase diversity, not just in gender, but in hiring and your recruiting practices.
Yeah, so we, in fact, I wrote, early on, in fact, it was on the MassBio site for a long time, but maybe it's still there, an article about the diversity, when we first started. And, when we first started, it was all men. Actually, the first time we physically got together, that's what I wrote in the article, it really looked like we were a fraternity, right? And we had to put quite a bit of effort to change our ratios, and it wasn't easy because, first of all, because we came out of a chemistry organization, right? And so it's not easy to recruit women chemists, which is really what the initial focus of the company was. But we put a lot of effort into it, and ultimately we were able to. Now it's gotten a lot easier since then in some ways, in that, once we moved, as we were progressing, we went from chemistry to biology, and of course in biology there are many more women, and so the job got easier, and our ratios became much more normalized. But I think the dialogue, as in some ways, I think although we're still kind of chipping away at it. Hold on, I have a cartoon for that as well. Hold on just a second.
I love this.
Where is it? Oh yeah, this is it. So that's my cartoon there. Chipping away at diversity, if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it. That's awesome.
Compared to 2015 is so active in terms of diversity, right? I mean, it's in every search, in every senior management search, in every junior search, in every search. The idea of having gender diversity is front and center. So I think we come a long way in terms of the dialogue. And so although I know some different companies do, but we don't have any target percentages, even though we'd like to be balanced and equal. But I dialogue in every single search is.
Praveen, it looks like you may have froze up for a second, but we do have a question from Sunny Schwartz. Sunny Schwartz would like to know, what pushback, if any, have you received or the company have received while promoting the diversity agenda?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, we haven't received any pushback. I would just say it's very difficult to fully execute, right? And I'll give you some examples that we had prior to an IPO. We had four that were women, and they were the venture investors, and so a whole bunch of them had to leave the board as we were IPOing. This is Pfizer Ventures and others, Barbara, Elaine, and others, and so I wanted to replace those women board members, and tried really hard, but we ran out of time, and just because I was focusing so heavily on recruiting women actually for the board, it took a long time, and in the end I wasn't able to recruit a woman for the board, and then obviously we're happy with Joe, but had to find someone last minute because we were going public, and so it's an example of, and that's happened a couple times where I've tried very hard to recruit women. In here I'm talking about senior management, and I'm talking about the board in particular, and it's taken so long that people lose patience, and that's so I would say there's no pushback. In fact, just the opposite. There's push forward. but it's not an easy strategy to execute.
So,
Hey,
so
there was Jose.
Praveen,
Oh,
Praveen,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to follow up on both of those questions. So I guess I hear you saying it's important and people are supporting you. But I think what's frustrating is what are the actual things that you are doing? So we can talk about looking for more women, but like, where are you recruiting that's different? How are you recruiting that's different? Where are you looking for technicians? Are you looking at diverse internship programs? Are you like, you know, are you hiring in the junior ranks to increase racial diversity? Like, you know, we talk a lot about how important it is and everybody wants it, but that isn't execute. And I don't even mean metrics aside. That'd be nice if we all had deliverable metrics for sure. But I guess I'm interested in like, what did you change to do? You know, instead of talking, I mean, talking about diversity and inclusion is important, but it doesn't make anything change.
Yeah, it does. So I think well, I think, first of all, I think the noticeable change, I think, that you can see, and I'll get to your question specifically, is, to me, this is very, very noticeable because I just don't think it was anywhere near as prominent, you know, when you're talking about 2015 as now, is that the dialogue and the pressure is so active, you know, to have a diverse workforce, right? So I think that's clearly different. Now, when you boil it down to the action steps, I think, and here I'll talk to more the senior management, the board, because that's what I'm directly responsible. Actually, in the younger ranks, both racially and gender-wise, it's quite diverse. I think the harder part, actually, for me, has been in the senior management and the board. And so for us, I think the tangible way that we do it is, you know, most of these positions are through a recruiter. You know, we say that we want 50% of the resumes to be women, right? And so, you know, right up front, that forces, you know, to have a very balanced pool of people that you're looking for. And because I think you know, going back to when we started, when we were trying, you know, when we were all men actually, and I was joking that this place looks like a fraternity, is that even when I went through that entire pile of resumes for chemistry at the time, there were like, you know, there was one woman in that pile, right? In a huge stack of papers. Right, and then so here, at least, you know, when you have upfront a 50-50 balance of resumes, at least you can start, you know, you're looking at a pretty balanced pool, at least to begin with.
Got it.
Okay, next up, Jose Treveo had a question for us.
Okay, just trying to unmute there. Great, thanks for that, Praveen. Yeah, I was just going to ask, so we're diving in a little more. What lesson did you learn? Any lessons from, you know, when the difficulty you had recruiting the female board member? I mean, one thing that comes to mind and that I've heard over and over again is you have to start really, really early, and you know, and it takes time. So I don't know if you've learned other lessons in terms of how to, you know, as you're recruiting for your next board member position or senior position. Yeah, so that's my question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key. You know, being a first-time CEO, right? I mean, you have so many things that you're trying to get done, right? And I do think that, and oftentimes, you know, a lot of these are very, very tactical. I do think that if you truly want diversity on the board and on the senior manager level, you really have to start early, right? And getting that balance right? Because I mean, because you're worried about costs and things like that, you know, as well. So you can't do it too early either. And so getting that balance right is the hard part, because I do think the same thing happened not just with the board members, but it happened with CMO, right? Because I was, you know, also I was super excited about our CMO, Peter Lindy, but that was another one where I tried really, really hard to get a woman, and you almost did, but ultimately she decided to start her own company in the end. But then you do start running out of time, right, and things like that. So I think you just really have to be proactive and early to you know, to enable it. I think that's been the lesson for us.
Sophia Carlton.
Hi, Praveen. Big admirer of your work and your cartoons. I have a question. You're talking a lot about hiring, women and obviously other diversity folks early into your management teams. But can you talk about also what steps people can take early in their careers, so young scientists like me, for example, can make sure that one day we can be in the management teams and in the boards of companies, and that somewhere along the way we don't fall through the cracks and end up, not being represented. So what is your advice for young folks in biotech? So, in 10, 20 years from now, we have higher representation.
Yeah, so I missed the first part of your question, Sophia, but I think I understand it. So I think because I think that is a true problem. Let me give you an example. One of the things I suggest to folks, and actually early on, the first year at Morphic, I actually made this mandatory, but it is somewhat more optional now, is that I forced every employee to tell me kind of what position that they want, like who has that position today, and specifically, who's the person, right? And so everyone, I said, I'll show you how to go reach out to them, but if you can't, I'll introduce you. I'm sure I can find a way to them. And the thing I noticed, though, because this is what it gets to your question, especially in those first few years, is the people who responded actually very positively to it was the women, right? Because I mean, there are a couple, this is back in the early days, so these were chemists, and we introduced a couple of our women chemists to senior heads of R&D that were women and multiple levels above, and they just thought it was the most amazing thing. And I showed them, look, by doing your research in that way and understanding their path, you're going to start building up a database and understanding what the path looks like for you to get there. It won't be the exact same, but you keep doing these interviews and understanding what it took to get there. Over time, that database will be built and it'll be like a compass going forward. And I think maybe it's potentially that networking aspect of it. I don't know for sure, but I can say, in the couple of years that we made that mandatory for every employee of Morphic, it was the women that it really, really strongly resonated with. Maybe they didn't realize that those mentors were there; they were that accessible, and it, multiple women have said it made a difference for them. So I think that's what I would at least start to understand. And map out the path of what it took for other people to get to the position that you want.
Allison, are you able to? Allison's coming in now. There she is.
Hi, thank you so much.
Hi.
Yeah, so I think it's really great when leadership is leading by example with diversity. What I wanted to ask you about is what advice do you have for when a company's leadership says they value diversity, but then cite a very competitive biotech job market for not actually practicing diversity in recruiting and therefore hiring? Multiple conversations, they talk about how, they really understand the importance of diversity. But do you have any advice for, how do we push from the bottom to really get this to be more of a cultural kind of an implementation at a company where, it's kind of going around kind of on the sidelines, but it's not quite in practice yet. Like what advice do you have for kind of pushing that?
Well, I guess I come back to the same, in some ways, the comment I made before is that we feel such pressure, right? Everything from legal and not legal like per se, but from shareholder perspective and other perspectives, we feel such pressure to have a diverse workforce, whether so I guess it's interesting, these comments, right? Because I'm assuming that every CEO feels the same pressures as me, right? And it's in your face all the time, right? And so that feels very different to me than 5 years ago. And so when you say that question, are you saying that some folks are not feeling that pressure, or there are no consequences. Because I think if you look at Morphic, just a year ago before the IPO, the senior management and the board would have looked like completely diverse, right? And then post IPO, right? And as a snapshot right now, because one of our senior, our head of biology left a few months ago, and it was a woman, right? And so we look much less diverse than we did a year ago. But it's kind of a snapshot in time that we're trying to rectify. And so, yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised that there are even companies that are not feeling the pressure that we are, in having a diverse workforce. I mean, I do believe in it, but even if I didn't hear from so many sources, makes that dialogue so active for us. So I guess, Allison, are you saying that there are companies that are not feeling the pressure?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not in the C-suite and I'm not a VP level. I certainly am trying to, as I hire for my teams, it's diversity is important for me. So I was one of the first employees at my company. And as we were bringing in additional leaders, we were kind of stuck in chemistry, kind of this exact same thing you described. Where it was, hey, we're actually looking for, we want to make sure we have diversity here. But they much more quickly gave up, as opposed, it seems like, your effort seems much more concerted where, the focus was on, we really need to hire someone. There are a lot of qualified candidates out there. So it seemed like that really fell to the wayside, as opposed to, we need to fill this role with a qualified person. As opposed to like really looking at overall, because if you pull up our company's website, they say, hey, we value diversity, but then you look at the pictures of who's leading the company, you say, well, this doesn't quite match up.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I guess one thing I could say is that obviously it sort of builds on itself. And actually, that article that I wrote for the MassBio website way back when, that was my panic, actually. My panic moment was, when we were all together, and it looked like a fraternity. I was like, oh my God, because I know these things build on themselves, right? And so if we didn't do something radical quickly, right, that could all build on itself in the wrong direction. And that's why I really put a lot of effort in those early days in getting women on board, because I knew that these things build on ourselves, and and so especially in those early days, it was actually myself making a huge effort, and so I do think like when we were talking about the CMC team, and actually we are quite racially diverse as well, and part of that was by strategy, but it was much more organic, like in the sense that it built on itself, right? Is that when once we had a critical mass, either in terms of women, you think about it from the CMC standpoint, or other racial groups, then the effort does build on itself. So I think it is I think, like you said, is that putting that initial effort and putting it in a really big way to build that core group, and let it build on itself from that perspective.
Well, Praveen, I just wanted to hop in there because as you was talking about the article that you have on the MassBio website, and I'll include a link of that in our follow-up email to the attendees. Can you talk about when is a good time for CEOs to take a stance or to speak out on some of the social issues that are taking place right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is important. I mean, and I didn't even fully, appreciate it, but I think we do have a bit of a platform, I mean, and it varies from company to company, but there's a little bit of a platform, right? And so from that perspective, I think especially related to the things that relate to our mission, right, which is human health, it's related to, diversity, it's related to talent, and all the things there. I think we have a complete license to really advocate for the things that we believe in, and I think CEOs do. I think it's so I do think it's important. I think there's a platform for it, and we should spend our time and energy in those things that that are important to us and that further our mission. And I think they do vary by, I think the great thing about diversity is that I think company to company, it is a little bit different because the interests of the CEO and the company are different. It's diverse.
Okay, let's see if there's one more question here from the audience. Oh, they said they're going to send it to you personally. Is it okay if I share your contact information with someone?
Oh yeah, no problem.
Okay, and then last but not least, I'm also going to ask you if I can share that article about your weighter's pad. I thought that was pretty interesting too. So I have to make sure I had your permission first.
No problem. Yeah, it's what we hand out with the waiter's pad when a new employee starts.
Okay, well, that looks like we're going to conclude our program today with Makeshift Happen. And Praveen, thank you so much for being a guest. And I would also like to invite everyone to return back June 1st with Dr. Regina James. Oh, we have one more question. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Well, they're going to hold off on asking a question. So what we're going to do is talk about right now, we're going to wrap things up, and I'm going to invite you to come back June 1st. Our guest is going to be Dr. Regina James. She's our Chief Medical Officer at 2M Clinical, and we're going to have a real conversation about diversity in clinical trials. So I do hope that you can join us June 1st, and also for any other updates that's MassBio related, anything that has to do with our members, anything that has to do with Makeshift Happen, please go to our LinkedIn page at MassBio Virtual Community, where we have continuous updates about what's going on in the industry and also what's going on in the membership. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you 2 Mondays from now, June 1st, and that will be with our guest, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Regina James. I'll see you then. Thank you.
Edie, I have a gift.
Hold on one second.
Well. Actually, it's not coming up here. I have a drawing of you, but it's not coming up here. So I'll just send it to you.
Oh, I can also share it too. We'll share it through
good.
the MassBio virtual community. How's that?
Perfect.
Awesome. So I'll see everyone in 2 Mondays. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edie.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.